Okay, here we go. So we ended off here last time, and now we're going over. Oh, come on! You know you can do it. Here she goes. There she goes. Okay. Right, we did go through all this last time. All right. Right. So the female system is much more cyclical than the male. We'll talk about that. Males are churning out sperm sort of continuously all the time at about the same rate every day for the vast majority of the male human's life all the way. I mean, it might change a little, but not a whole lot. Cyclical. Females. Cyclical. C-Y-C-L-I-C-A-L. Like a cycle. So this is one of the things that to understand about, we talked about this a little bit when we talked about hermaphrodites earlier yesterday, the fact that humans can't be functional hermaphrodites. And one of the reasons for that is that human gonads, ovaries or testes, come from the same origin. If you are female, you are conceived, you have 2 X chromosomes, you go through your development, and your gonads stay ovaries. If you're male, early in your development, in utero, in your mother, what would have become your ovaries instead receive a little burst of testosterone, and they migrate down and become testicles. So you can't have both. You either get one or the other. If you're female, you are born with all the eggs you're going to have when you're born in your ovaries, but you don't start maturing those eggs and releasing those eggs until you hit puberty. So the way that works is every cycle in both ovaries, as far as I understand it, a number of follicles will begin to develop, each one containing an egg, and it's sort of like a little race to see who gets ready first. And then when the hormones are right and when everything's right, one of those follicles will be ready first, maybe 2, maybe 3, and will release an egg or 2 or 3, but usually only one. One egg from one follicle in one ovary. And I said last class, I'm not sure that it's a strict alternation cycle to cycle, left, right, left, right, left, right. You might, and there are women who, yeah, there's all sorts of variations on that theme. You can do fine with just one ovary. Okay. And those eggs are not done with meiosis. None of them are done. They don't finish meiosis unless you get fertilized. But you'll go through like prophase 1. Maybe you'll finish meiosis 1. Yeah, you should probably know a lot of them. You don't need to know every single detail of every single one, but you should definitely know the events of prophase 1. That's really important. You should know the difference between what happens in prophase 1 and prophase 2. You should know the difference between what's getting split from each other. And you should, I don't know. I mean, the phases are just arbitrarily named. They're not, we've just said, well, that's this phase and that's this phase, and we've described them by looking at the microscope. I think those phases we're not going to be responsible for anymore. So you should have some idea of what's actually going on in the process and what comes out the other end. So you ovulate about every 28 days if you're a human female, although early on, when you're younger, that is much more variable. Usually as you get older, it becomes more reliable, but not always. Everyone's mileage varies a little bit. Once you ovulate, the follicle then becomes called the corpus luteum. That's Latin for? Good. Luteum means yellow.
Yellow body?
Yeah, when they look at it under the microscope, when they look at an ovary under the microscope, it has these follicles that have released an egg and now look yellow. I don't know why.
Wait, what's a follicle?
Let's see if there's a picture here.
It's a partially developed egg.
That's definitely male. See there?
Oh, okay.
So there are a variety of follicles. So a follicle is a bunch of cells in the ovary that are sort of supporting the development of an egg, an ova. When you get to a certain point, that ova is ready, it gets released, and then the follicle then becomes the corpus luteum. So a corpus luteum is a follicle that's released its egg in that cycle.
But why is it so much bigger?
Oh, well, this follicle here is pretty big. Maybe it swells a little bit. These cells then start to release hormones, probably progesterone. Yeah, probably progesterone, and we'll talk about those hormones more in a minute. If you don't get fertilized and an egg does not implant in the uterus, then the corpus luteum breaks down, stops releasing those hormones, and you menstruate, and then you start again. The egg travels down the oviduct. We said last time that fertilization would happen in the oviduct. If it gets fertilized, it implants in the uterus, in the lining, which is called the endometrium. We already went through that. Girl parts. Onward. Boy parts. Girl parts. Oh, mammary. In order to give milk, you have to have a baby. Unless we injected you with lots of hormones, we could probably get you to give milk. We could probably get them to give milk if we gave them enough hormones. But you release, there are a couple of hormones that you release right as you're giving birth, oxytocin and prolactin, that then allow you to give milk. And that's true for all the mammals. So cows, if you're a dairy farmer, you have to have your dairy cows get pregnant and have a calf before they'll give milk. But with if you're a dairy farmer, the process is kind of all been denaturified. So almost all dairy cows are artificially inseminated. They never actually meet a bull, and that's for safety reasons.
Bull's very aggressive.
Bulls are very aggressive and very large, and yeah, you don't necessarily want your prize milk cow tangling with a bull if you can avoid it.
Can't you artificially have them pregnant?
That's how they do it, almost always. Which is, if you think about that industry, there are some really weird jobs in there. First of all, there's people whose job it is to get semen out of a bull. That is could be a very challenging and incredibly dangerous job. If I'm not mistaken, how do they do it? There's a variety of pieces to the puzzle. You have to have a cow who's in heat, who's ovulating, so that the male bull will be interested. And then at the last minute, you have to switch, and he has to try to mate with a fake cow. And then you collect the semen. You can get killed doing this, by the way, because you have thousands of pounds of very excited male bull. And you're trying to get in the way. Yeah, that's exactly right. There's an artificial female cow.
It takes 3 people.
It takes 3 people.
One
But
to handle the teaser animal, one to control the bull, and one to collect the semen.
I told you, I had it exactly right. There's a cow who's ovulating.
I feel like there has to be a way that is more surgery.
No. Because just getting sperm won't work. You need the whole mixture. You need semen for it to work. Oh, we've got video. We don't even have to use our imaginations anymore in this world.
Yeah, we got video.
We've got video. We're not showing the video.
Pictures no, Steve, no. Oh god.
Okay. Anyway, you can do that if you want. And then there are people, much safer job, but still some hazards, who go around to the dairy farms with their samples of bull semen in liquid nitrogen, and they thaw them out, and they have to tell whether there's no sense inseminating a cow who's not ovulating. So you have to try to somehow they know whether the cows are ovulating or not. And then they put bull semen in them, and they get pregnant, and they have a calf, and everything's good. There's a problem with the dairy industry. You only need one bull for hundreds of female cows using this system. What happens to the rest of the boy cows, the rest of the boy dairy cows?
Hamburgers.
Nope.
Bullfighting.
No.
Running with the bulls.
No. Those are beef cattle.
Beef jerky.
Veal.
Oh yeah, it feels so good.
Because they're not particular. Those cows have been those cows have been very carefully bred for milk production, not meat production.
Veal?
Yeah. So the male dairy cows usually go into the veal industry. They only raise them for 6 months and then they slaughter them.
They keep them in a small cage so they don't get much exercise.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. We had a veal cow growing up, and he just ran around with our sheep, and that worked fine. But anyway, that's what happens to male dairy cows. And only a few grow up to be bulls. And then only the best bulls get, get tricked every once in a while. And as a farmer, you can choose the pedigree and the characteristics of the bull that's going to give the semen that's going to impregnate your cows. And you pay different amounts of money depending on which bull you're using.
They're gonna
Crazy.
do that with humans pretty soon.
They do that with humans, Doug, already.
Test tube.
No, they do artificial insemination all the time. There are
No, but,
sperm banks.
No, like they're able to choose different genes.
No, but they've been doing it for years. So if you're a female person and you want to have a baby and you don't want to get married,
Oh yeah.
you can go to the sperm bank and you can choose. They'll tell you about the sperm that you're getting. No. They'll tell you where he went to college, what color his hair is, what color his eyes are, how tall he was. There's a whole thing. You can choose. I mean, you won't know the personality so much, but you can choose some characteristics that maybe you're interested in. It's happening right now, a fair bit. I had a student at another school who, she just visited us a couple summers ago with her baby. She and her partner, they're both women. Obviously, they're not going to make babies that way. And they had a friend, a male friend, and he donated semen, and that's how they had their baby. So she knows the father, but she didn't have sex with the father. Interesting.
So how does he feel?
I think he was what was the word? That came up in conversation. He was flattered that they were interested in having him be the father of their baby.
Yeah, but knowing that you have a kid, but you're not really.
Well, I think he knows I mean, I don't think he's completely out of their lives.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's like, the uncle or whatever. It's a different, it works for them. Anyway. All right, so you have to have a baby to have milk.
Play. Is it video?
I guess there is. Let's see what happens if we click play. I don't think play works in this presentation. Yeah, I remember play doesn't work in OpenOffice. Wait, no, it's spinning.
Oh god.
It can't be that bad. It's from our biology book.
No, I meant the ball of death.
Yeah, ball of death.
Spin wheel.
Beach ball.
Yeah, now we're done.
We're gonna watch a rocket. Like these next 20 It's pretty
Are you
soon.
gonna be an astronaut, Steve?
No.
Why not?
Let's try it. Let's see what happens.
You should go to outer space.
Nah, it's my dream to go to space.
You dream of that?
No? Like, not to be an astronaut, but to go to space.
That would be cool.
We're working on it.
All right, sorry, we're stuck in the mail system and it's not running the other
The
program.
reproductive system of the human male consists of testes, various ducts and glands, and the penis.
Video here or just audio?
The brain, acting through hormones,
I'm working on it.
controls the process of reproduction.
Put 4 fingers on the pattern.
Sperm develop in the testes in coiled tubes called seminiferous tubules.
Up or down?
Spermatogenesis produces several hundred million sperm each day. The sperm from each testis mature and become motile in a coiled tube called the epididymis. When a man is sexually aroused, muscular contractions propel the sperm out of the epididymis and into the vas deferens,
There we
which
go.
loops over the bladder. The vas deferens joins a duct from the seminal vesicle to form the short ejaculatory duct, which with the ejaculatory duct from the other side joins the urethra. The urethra conveys the sperm out through the penis. In addition to the seminal vesicles, the prostate gland and the bulbourethral glands contribute to the seminal fluid that nourishes and protects the sperm and lubricates their path.
All right, he's done. All right, well, that was like moderately R-rated. But, you know, you're supposed to be taking college biology. You signed up for this, so that's that. And then we were in this. There we go. All right, so back to our guy here. So I think if we go one forward, there we go. So front view, bladder, vas deferens are these tubes. Epididymis, so the testes is where the sperm are made and where testosterone is released. The epididymis is where the sperm hang out after they're fully formed and ready to go. The vas deferens is the tube that will carry them up into the body and then out. It joins with the urethra and out, and then they can go out through the penis. And then there's a bunch of glands. The one you'll hear the most about in males is the prostate gland. Why? Yeah, that's where boys get cancer, is the prostate gland. Women, you get cervical cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, and breast cancer. Males get breast cancer, testicular cancer, prostate cancer. Those are the biggies. Although I'm sure you can get cancer anywhere in there.
Why haven't they created a better way to do a prostate gland?
Oh, it's a pretty good way. I mean, as opposed to having to cut you open or to...
What's the way they do it?
Oh, God, Steve. Well, let me
I'm
go.
not even kidding.
Next slide. Ready? Ready? Here we go. All right, so here's your prostate right here. Here's your anus. So when they want to figure out if this is swollen or not correct, they can feel straight up and in, very uncomfortable. Something to look forward to as you get older and have your checkups. Prostate exam. 2 thumbs down. But,
These are hands?
Yes, Steve.
yes, just one finger, not their whole hand. That would be a bad day. I'm sorry.
And that's the only way?
That's the only way right now. But Steve, it's way in there. Yeah? There's no other way. Anything else would be worse. But, yeah. So, culture shock. I'm sorry, Steve.
What are they doing in Korea?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. You're young. They haven't started to check your prostate yet. They will.
Around 40, right?
30.
Oh, God.
Yeah, maybe earlier. Anyway, side view of the male, epididymis, vas deferens, prostate. There's a little gland right here, the bulbourethral gland, that produces an alkaline fluid, a basic fluid that comes out before ejaculation that neutralizes any like acid or urine compounds in the urethra so that you don't poison the sperm right off the bat. And that can cause trouble because you get some leakage before ejaculation that can catch people by surprise and there can be sperm in that whole mix, and you can wind up getting pregnant when you don't think you should be getting pregnant. And that's unfortunate. The urethra in the male is both doing double duty. It does urine duty and it does semen duty. That's different. And there's some valving back here by the prostate that controls which comes out when. You can't do both simultaneously. Either urine can come out or semen can come out, not at the same time. There's valves that control that, in case you were interested. The problem with the male system is the prostate can get enlarged, swollen, whatever, and block off the ducts coming out of the bladder for urine. So you get these older guys who can't pee. when they need to, when they want to. And that apparently is very problematic.
Don't they like?
Drill? No.
No. Don't they put a tube?
That's temporary.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't. So if you're in the hospital, and this is the same for males or females, they can put a catheter in your urethra all the way up into your bladder so that, like, if you're in surgery or if you're unconscious, they can just drain urine out of you at some steady rate. But you just don't walk around with that. That's a bad day. And you can imagine, again, nursing school, doctor's school, learning how to thread a catheter. You really want that person to be asleep. And you got to be really, because you can injure them, right? You could get it not in straight or not in right or like into the edge. Well, we need nurses. We need doctors. It's not like it's optional. Someone has to do it. And then the blue in this picture is erectile tissue. So that can fill with blood, and that's what causes erections in humans. In other organisms, it's not the same. I think in some of the birds, it's lymph. In some of the walrus, I think it's actually a bone that moves into the penis that makes it erect.
A bone moves in?
Yeah.
Ew.
So it's muscles and bones. If you go back to the female system, most of the same tissues are in the female clitoris, and it's up there, but it's also erectile tissue, sensory neurons. It's basically the same structure, just smaller and no urethra going through it. So that's that. All right.
We were one ahead of this.
Yep. And then ahead of that. The other thing about the male system is there's a bit of skin that goes over the tip of this normally. It's removed in many, many cases surgically when the babies are first born. That's tradition in the Jewish faith, maybe the Muslim faith.
What is it?
Circumcision. So not all penises will look the same. But and that used to be sort of traditional or cosmetic, but they've now been doing research on it more, and they found out, they did a big study in Africa where HIV is very common, and they found out that the rate of AIDS transmission from circumcised men versus uncircumcised men is way lower, like 30% lower. So circumcised men are much less likely to acquire AIDS and much less likely to pass it on. And that's a pretty big finding. So I'm guessing that circumcision rates are going to go back up again. It was running about 50% in the United States. Just putting it out there. Oh, this is another weird thing about the male system. So the female system is all pretty neatly tucked inside. It's all in there. The male system is decidedly outside. And for obvious reasons, the penis is outside, but the testicles, putting testicles outside is a risky proposition. Ask a boy that you know. They'll tell you. Sometimes they get hit. Hopefully not snagged. And that's problematic, right? You're putting your whole genetic future out there. Why put them out there? Why not keep them safely inside? Testicles outside. Why?
Because your body temperature is too high for the sperms to.
That appears to be the right answer. Yeah. Apparently, core body temperature is too warm for sperm production and survival.
But when it's cold, it goes in.
Oh yeah, that's another weird thing. So there's actually a little, what do you call it? A tendon attached to testicles. So when it gets cold, they move up, and when it gets hot, they move down. So they move around they're always at the right temperature. And if you check out like a bull, they're running a much larger set of testicles. Oh my God, they're huge. But same thing. Still outside. Sheep, same thing. But those guys, bulls and sheep, again, they have a mating season. They do all their mating in a very short period of time, not spread out over a much longer, not spread out sort of every few days. It may be like 12 times in a day for like a few days, and then not at all for the rest of the year. So they're on a different schedule. All right. Yeah, the Leydig cells in the testicles produce testosterone. Females produce a little bit of testosterone. Males produce significantly more testosterone, and that's what give them their sort of maleness to some extent. Yeah. Sure? Okay. All right, here we go. The vas deferens, that tube that carries sperm up into the body, that's what you would cut in a vasectomy. So that's probably the most common form of birth control in the world. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. The most common form of birth control in the world is still sterilization.
So how does that work?
Cutting the vent.
All right. So here we go. Yep. So in a vasectomy, the doctor comes in right in the front of the scrotum, comes in, cuts and ties off this tube, both of them. All it does is it stops sperm from coming up, but it doesn't. Sperm is a very, very small part of the volume of semen. It's, what do you call it? Insignificant. Most of the semen comes from the seminal vesicles and the prostate. So a male who's vasectomized, you couldn't tell unless you knew. Like everything comes out the same. Everything works the same. All the hormones are the same. It's not the same as castration. Castration is when you remove the testicles. Then you don't produce testosterone. That changes everything. That's what you do to dogs and sheep, unless you want them to produce babies, or cows to make them steers, or horses to make them geldings. Why do we do that to all these poor male animals?
So they don't try to have sex all the time?
No.
So it lowers their testosterone.
Lowers their aggression.
That's the problem. That's the right answer. Testosterone is difficult, right? Pretty much all the bad behavior you see in males is because of testosterone, mostly. Like most of the trouble, notice that boys tend to get in trouble more than girls, like with things like violence and aggression and, just that kind of bad behavior. Not, girls get in trouble their own ways, but that's what boys tend to get in trouble with. So, and it's the same thing with horses and cows and sheep and pigs and chickens. Roosters are a pain in the ass. They're incredibly violent. Go ahead.
Can that be reversed?
Vasectomy?
Yeah.
Yes, but it's tricky, and it's not 100%.
Getting your tubes tied, that can be reversed.
Getting your tubes tied, so if you're female, yeah, they can go in, and they can cut these tubes on both sides, so the eggs can't get to the uterus. However, that's surgery, major surgery. That requires that's abdominal surgery. They have to go in, they make a little tiny incision near your navel, or lower, forget where they go in, and they have to go in with an arthroscopic. The time that women often have their tubes tied is when they're having a C-section. Because if you're having a C-section, everything's out there. I've gotten to see a C-section. Samantha, my daughter, she came out backwards.
I was upside down backwards.
Yeah, she wasn't coming out. And so Mrs. Southam had spinal anesthesia. She was awake, but she couldn't feel anything from like here down.
She had like a spinal tap?
Yeah, spinal anesthesia. An epidural.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an epidural, it was a spinal. It was a little different. I don't know what the difference is. Anyway, they basically inject morphine into your spine. So you can be fully awake and fully conscious and not feel anything from below where they inject the morphine. No, she couldn't see because they had a drape, but I could see. So like I'm watching them like, you know, cut her open, and they had to cut open her abdomen, but then they had to cut open her uterus too, and then the baby comes out, and that's fairly alarming, because you know they're purple and they're kind of weird looking. Yeah, and then the baby comes out, and that all comes out, and everything's fine, and then they took the whole uterus out and stitched it up, but it's like sitting on her tummy, you know, they're sewing up her uterus. I'm like, whoa, that's your uterus, and then they put it back in, and they stapled her shut, and it was all good. She's fine. And then Max was another C-section, because he was...
Normally, once you have one C-section...
Now, yeah, pretty much now, if you have a C-section, that's it. You're stuck with C-sections for the rest of your childbearing. They don't usually let you try for a variety of reasons.
I think like one of my relatives, I don't know, like using epidural negatively affected the child, the kid, like
Possible.
developmental.
I don't think so.
No.
It depends. Like, if you can do childbirth normally without painkillers and all that stuff, that's great. But if they have to do a C-section, they better give you painkillers. Yeah, you better be. And I think the spinal was better than for Max. It was another emergency C-section, but they couldn't get the spinal to take, so they just put her to sleep. So Mrs. Southam. So I wasn't allowed to see Max. They won't let you in the operating room when the patient's asleep. So I got to see Samantha come out, but not Max. I got to see him shortly thereafter, and Mrs. Southam didn't get to see him for quite a while because she was asleep. But anyway.
I was asleep when I came out.
You were asleep when you came out? Babies? Not so asleep. Anyway.
No, like umbilical.
Oh yeah, Max had that. Every time Mrs. Southam pushed with Max, his umbilical cord got squished against his shoulder, I think, and his pulse would go boom. And they were like, okay, he's coming out. Into the operating room. Out you go. So both of our kids are miracles of modern medicine. So you can cut oviducts, but that is surgery. A vasectomy is much simpler. It's like getting a filling. It's what do you call it? It's Novocaine. It's a very small incision, tie, cut, done. There's a little bit of swelling, but then you're pretty much good to go. And that, notice, there's a whole lot of people who have 1 or 2 kids in this country, probably in Korea too. And that's because once they have 1 or 2 kids, someone's getting sterilized. They're not using birth control pills or condoms or any of the other things that you teenagers have to use because you're on the other side of that. You're like, well, I have to be able to have kids later on. This is more permanent. It's not that reversible. Vasectomies, you can reverse them, but it's not 100%. Having your tubes tied, you can reverse it, but it's not 100%. It is supposed to be permanent. So that's what they cut. So yeah, but with a vasectomy, it doesn't change anything except the fact that if you looked at the semen under the microscope, there would be no sperm there. That's the difference. But otherwise you can't tell. You can't tell. All right. Onward through the all right. You're on your own here. Sorry. All right. Yep. Whoa. All right, let's look at this. All right, here we go. So this is sperm getting produced. So the testicle is made up of lots and lots and lots of very fine tubing. In the walls of the tubing is where the sperm get produced. So there are cells, stem cells out here that undergo mitosis and then meiosis to produce lots of sperm. And then those sperm are released into the center of the tube and they get moved into the epididymis and they wait there. That's how testicles work. And you all know about meiosis. That's great. That's what I said. So stem cells, mitosis to make more and more diploid cells. Before you can do meiosis, you have to make cells to do the meiosis. So this is happening all the time.
Is it possible for the sperm to bind onto the diploid?
For the sperm to bind up? No, they're moving. They're moving. There's actually movement from the outer edge of the tube to the inner edge of the tube as these cells mature, and then the sperm wind up in the middle of the tube.
You're saying stem cells?
Yeah.
Are those
Well,
same stem cells used in stem cell research?
no. A stem cell is any cell that can give rise to other cells.
Okay.
So you have a whole slew of different kinds of stem cells in your body. Usually when they're doing stem cell research, they're mostly working with either pluripotent or totipotent stem cells. Stem cells that are similar to the cells that made up the early embryo.
So female?
No.
No?
Doesn't matter whether they're male or female. They're cells that have the ability to give rise to any other kind of cell. These stem cells, can only give rise to spermatogonium and primary spermatocytes.
Okay.
Right? They can give rise to that over and over again, but they can only give rise to those cells. You have stem cells in your bone marrow that can only give rise to blood cells. You have stem cells throughout your body that can only give rise to a very narrow range of tissue. But when you were first conceived, those early cells, those first 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 cells, you take one of those cells, it can make a whole person. That's how identical twins happen. You break that embryo apart into two. It could be just one cell that breaks off and grows a whole nother person at that early stage. As those cells move further and further along, they become fated. They actually take on their permanent, they can't go backwards necessarily. Some really interesting research has been done that has allowed people to reset cells and make them back into primordial stem cells. Take a skin cell, which is kind of set, it's fated, it's already got its fated, not faded, like it's achieved its fate. They can take that and change a few genes, it's only 4 apparently, and convert that back into a stem cell. And that's fairly recent and fairly exciting.
Why are people mad about stem cell research?
The big reason was the very first stem cell research they were doing, in order to get those early stem cells, they needed an embryo. So they were taking cells from embryos that they got either by producing an embryo in the lab, taking an egg and sperm and mixing them together and letting it grow for a few cells. But people were like, no, that's a baby. Well, it's not going to become a baby unless you implant that embryo in a female person, in her uterus. But people got upset about, because you are in fact doing conception in a dish. Or they were using, one of the other fears that they were going to use aborted embryos from abortions, and that really freaked people out.
But now they're just using skin cells?
Well, now
Or they're using
they're using cell lines that were derived from, I don't know where they were all derived from, but I don't think they were from, and the other one they were talking about using was embryos that are in an embryo bank. In other words, say you get married, you want to have kids, you can't quite have kids, so they have to do in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization means they take your wife's egg and the husband's sperm, they mix them together, they produce embryos, quite a few embryos. They take 1 or 2, they implant them in the mom, she has babies, the rest they freeze. Next time around, you don't have to do that whole cycle. They just take some out of the freezer and put them in the mom again until you have as many kids as you want to have. But in most cases, you have embryos left over that you don't want. You don't want any more kids. You're done. But you still have 8 embryos in the freezer. What do? They throw them away.
In the trash?
In bio waste. Yeah, they autoclave them or whatever. I mean, it's just a few cells, right? So what's the big deal? That's a moral question. That's one of those places where I'm not going to tell you the answer because it's very personal. But the proposal was to use those discarded embryos for stem cell research. And for obvious moral reasons, that caused people to become upset. Some people, not other people. People were like, sure, you can take my extra embryos. I'm not going to use them. I'm done having kids. And other people were like, no, they're all potential humans. We have to have all of them. And yet it is legal to throw them away. There's some really, I don't know. And I don't know what the rules are in Korea either. I have no idea. Do you know?
Stem cell injection illegal.
Stem cell what?
Injection.
No, like abortion.
No, but like with abortion and in vitro fertilization and extra embryos, and I'm sure all that technology is happening in Korea, but I don't know what the rules are. You can check it out.
What is it? Pro-life and pro-choice?
Choice, yeah. All right.
Pro-life, I think, is
Every child must be born and raised, whether you want to or not. All right. Sorry, you can tell which side of the debate I fall on. It's All right. There's a little sperm anatomy. Very, very small cells. We could see them under the microscope. We should get like cow sperm or cow semen or something and look at it under the microscope. It'd be really cool. I mean, we could get boy semen, but that would be easy. But it would just cross some kind of boundary that I'm not willing to cross in my class. That would be the most readily available, but we're not doing that. Anyway, mostly they are a DNA delivery device. They have a nucleus. They have behind that, they have a midpiece which contains mitochondria, and then they have a tail. And the mitochondria are just producing ATP to run that tail. They have no stored energy sources. One of the really important components of semen is glucose or fructose. So these guys have their own lunch. They're going on a journey. It's a journey of very, very, very many body lengths, from about the cervix all the way through the uterus, all the way up the oviduct to find an egg.
So is that like from here to the daddy hole?
No, it's like from here to California.
Really?
Sperm are really small.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it's many body lengths
Oh, wow.
if you measure it that way. I mean, it's probably a journey of
Can we go to California?
10 or 20 centimeters, but it's, they're really small. And then on the front of the thing, there's an acrosome. There are enzymes there that it's going to use to get inside the egg. And it takes a lot of sperm working together to work their way through so that one can finally get in. So one sperm won't get you pregnant. I mean, one sperm is ultimately all it takes to fertilize an egg, but it takes a group of sperm working together to get through the outer layers of the egg. So males who have low sperm count, they're still producing sperm, but they aren't very effective at producing pregnancy. Because it takes a lot of sperm get lost along the way. A lot of sperm get lost along the way. And half the sperm definitely get lost along the way because there's two oviducts. One will have the egg, and one won't. So all those sperm that went the wrong way, they're out of luck. Right, they're done. But males release approximately 100 million sperm at a time. 100 million sperm at a time. Like a third of the population of the United States every time. Crazy. It's a lot of sperm. Those mitochondria are not contributed to the embryo. The mom gives all the mitochondria, the egg. All right, we're getting there. This is that whole follicle formation thing, corpus luteum thing, right here. And here, you can see.
Is this of the egg?
This is the egg, yeah. So this happens in the embryo?
Oogenesis?
Yeah.
Is it, how do you pronounce that?
Oogenesis. Oh yeah, so you have an oogonium, which is in your ovary, becomes a primary oocyte, which is present at your birth in your ovary. It stops at meiosis 1, in prophase of meiosis 1. After the egg is released, it finishes meiosis 1, and it starts meiosis 2, and then it stops again in metaphase, and it releases that first polar body. That's the DNA that's discarded, because remember, all the cytoplasm stays in one cell, and the other cell just gets the discarded DNA. That's a polar body. If it gets fertilized, then it will continue on with the rest of meiosis 2, and then it will combine with the sperm. So the egg is a little more, the sperm is already haploid, it's all done, it's all mature. Egg is released from a follicle and then becomes a corpus luteum and releases progesterone. Same picture. Same picture. Females stop releasing eggs after a while. Males don't stop producing sperm pretty much at all. All right, here we go, hormones. You've got hormones from your hypothalamus, which is in your brain, your anterior pituitary, and your gonads that control this. So 4 hormones, maybe 5, you need to pay attention to. 6, 7, there's a lot of hormones. So your hypothalamus gives off gonadotropin-releasing hormone, both in males and females. That causes the hypothalamus to release follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone in both males and females. In males, follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone are going to cause the males both to produce sperm and to produce testosterone. In females, it's going to cause them to ovulate and maintain their uterus. So these are all, that's a releasing hormone. These are, when you have a hormone that causes other hormones to be released, that's a tropic hormone. All right, we will go through the details of the menstrual cycle hormones when we meet again. Have a lovely weekend. Try to recover from that assembly video we saw, and try not to worry about meteors or meteorites or asteroids or whatever's coming. And oh, make sure you go see the Richard Blanco thing tonight and the volcano tomorrow, the snowcano at 6:30 tomorrow. That's gonna be epic. Fire,
Make sure
lots
you
of
do not
fire.
go on the snowbank, or you will get tackled or shot.
Why?
Bye, Mr. Salmon.
Bye bye.